What's up? In this segment, we're going to talk about Star Trek and kind of merging it with the new age concept of aliens. So, this will normally be a video I may not put up on this channel, but I thought it was fitting. Star Trek, as a cultural phenomenon, may not be able to be touched. When you think sci fi, you have to think them. You know, a lot of times what's happened, like people don't even realize the first Star Trek show was actually canceled. Literally. Right? It was canceled. Fans try to bring it back. Big time red alerting campaign. They brought it back. Still lasted only a season. So it was only really lasted like 3 seasons. But after the 3rd season and it was canceled, it took on a life of its own. Just off that, it's legendary in a sense. Because when people think Star Trek, Captain Kirk is probably the first person that you think about. Spock, like that's the original Star Trek. Yes, Next Generation is close. I'm not gonna lie, Next Generation is close. And after those two, then it's, I mean, no disrespect to Voyager and Deep Space Nine, but you know, it goes downhill after those two. But I don't think people really understand what Star Trek did. Even the whole cell phone phenomenon, the communicators, you know, tapping on the shoulder. That was a cell phone. They came up with that. You know, first interracial kiss. Even in the sense of having a like kind of like a multi-galactic community back then in the 60s. Unheard of, to be honest. So, in general, and especially since Gene Roddenberry, he actually presented it as a Western, kind of like an outer space Western. And obviously took on a life of its own. But when you put that, and you put it and add it up, there's not many sci-fi shows that can touch it. Especially since I could criticize Deep Space Nine and Voyager, but I have to admit they lasted 7-8 seasons. 7-8 seasons for a regular show at this point is like legendary for regular show. If a regular show lasted 7 seasons, it's considered pretty much a classic. They lasted it with no problems. You know, Enterprise itself didn't last as long, but when they redid the new Star Trek movies, J.J. Abrams did a really good job. In general, like, they did a really good job in keeping the legacy. But Star Trek has a lot of things that people don't really see. Coming into the New Age community now. And this is the classic example of when Venus interferes with people's metaphysics. You could look at a lot of movies, even movies like V in the 80s. They tried to redo it later on, didn't work out. Everyone was influenced by Star Trek, to be honest. It's obvious. Including the people who are doing spirituality. So when a guy like David Icke says reptilians, and you know, they come in and they're gonna do a whole bunch of stuff, he got that really from V. Now I'm not saying that he got it totally from V, the show, but you can see how it influenced him. And the dangerous thing is, Venus as itself is so important as imagination. The Venus faculty in the mind's imagination. It's basically how, if you're an occultist, you use it to recreate the world. If you're an artist, you use it to inspire others. The problem is, if you're not really grounded in other types of information, it could go on delusion and fantasy very quickly. So sometimes you can look at even people's spirituality or anything else, and you can see how the science fiction creeps in and alters the way they see the regular world. So when you see the New Age community and they had a fascination on aliens, it sort of killed spirituality as you knew it. Because even when they got spiritual, it was more about quick fixes. So they will go into Buddhism, they'll go into India, but they wouldn't give you the real Buddhism. They wouldn't give you the real India. And it's not just their fault. A lot of people from the East actually try to take advantage of that as well. I respect the Dalai Lama, but I have to be real. The Tibetan Buddhism the Dalai Lama shows to the West is not the same Buddhism that you would see in Tibet or Tibetan offshoot colonies, like, you know, communities in India. So he even presents a lighter face of Buddhism. And it started a trend. And so when the New Age people took the Eastern sciences, they used it as a quick fix to feed into the alien fantasies, which was started from a lot of sci-fi, science fiction. Unfortunately, when someone hears this video, they're going to think I'm attacking the New Age community, and I'm not. This whole channel is to kind of show you the difference between pure Venus and Venusian energy and Neptune energy merging together. And with Venetian energy and Neptunian energy merged together, magic happens, literally. And the thing is that sometimes the concept of aliens resonated so well with other people because there was some truth to it, but from a totally different angle than what the people think. It's kind of like you take a drug, get hallucinate. You hallucinate. When you hallucinate, I mean, they don't look at it like this, but it opens the minds up to have access to different levels of perception that you don't normally have access to. When this happens, you go on different channels. So when you go on different channels, there's basically intelligences in those channels. So when a material person says, prove to me aliens exist, you're not going to, because they're not material. Now, I'm not going to be like a New Age community and talk about how advanced they are and then how spiritual they are. They're kind of in between. So like, imagine when you dream, you go into some of these realities. So the reason why seasoned occultists would not pay much attention to the UFO phenomenon or the alien phenomenon the way New Age people do it is because they have no gravity, in a sense. They're a little bit better, honestly, than what you would see in a comic book in terms of being real. They're real, but only when you go into a certain state of consciousness, and even then, it can make you relatively imbalanced very quickly, because you really can't do anything. That can't do anything to change your physical life. And in a sense, the creator of Star Trek, I find it interesting because I think he's a brilliant person. But it just shows what happens when the external nature or the external mentality, the material mentality, gets into even spirituality or into imagination. Because instead of the creation inspiring, it does inspire, but what happens with all Venetian tools is that eventually it burns out. Because in essence, in the end of the day, if you can't integrate, if energy itself, you can't integrate two different frequencies into one and harmonize it, and do as Buddha said, take the middle path, it would always crash and always fade away eventually. So in a sense, even though as amazing as Star Trek is, trendsetting, I don't think you can name anything else in sci-fi that could match it. Star Wars comes close. It does. But Star Wars, to me, is actually more with what we're trying to do here at home. Star Wars was sort of like Venus and Neptune, combining it. So even though it was great, some people, it would actually be a little bit too advanced for some people. Believe it or not. Like when you really get out of the fluff, the Hollywood fluff, when you really get into the story itself, it's extremely advanced. Sometimes too advanced for the average person. I think Star Trek really hit the head on the nose when it spoke about, hey, if we're in the future, why would there be racism? Why would there be crime? We're supposed to be more advanced. The problem is, like anything Venus, only if you're going to travel on a spaceship, you're not really as advanced spiritually. You might be more advanced externally, materially, but spiritually, I don't know. If you go in the Star Trek world and you have a problem, a spiritual problem, or you got a problem, you need an exorcism, they'll be just as clueless as the person in the 14th century or the person now. So if you don't have growth in the spiritual and the material, then it's imbalanced. So in essence, when you look at it carefully, instead of the New Age community saying, hey, listen, you change your state of consciousness, there's intelligences or channels that you can plug into that you can access. Don't overrate them. They're not going to change your life. It's just something that's there. But instead, it got people focused on that. And they started to mix up reality with the astral problem or the astral situation with delusion, where you think it actually has physical relevance. So when a material person says, prove to me aliens exist, you're not going to be able to do that. And that's where the problem comes in. And part of that, and then when the person gets into more matrix people or more mainstream crowds, they just look delusional. Why? Because like Venus, if it's not controlled, if Venus is not balanced by Mars or Mercury, which is very hard for most people to do, then it leads to delusion. It could lead to delusion. Because when you deal with the planetary powers, really really is really about the sun, the moon, and Mercury in terms of the 7 major powers. Neptune, which we're trying to do now, it's one of the outside powers. Just as powerful as the 3 major ones I just said, but usually very hard for a layman to understand. So never think this is to basically put down any science fiction creation or any Venetian tool, because you can't get to Venus. You can't get to Neptune for Venus. What this is meant to do is meant to show you the differences. When people think decoding movies could replace reading real occult books or real spiritual books, that's from Venetian energies getting out of control. So when that happens, we're forced to actually try to come in and reset balance. So it's not really about criticizing Venus. It's about just putting things in its proper place. So with Star Trek, the New Age community not being able to see facts from fiction is what caused them to evolve the way they did. And as 2012 came and nothing happened the way they predicted, they represent an industry that unless they change, they will die out. When you get into aliens being astral, you could explain why you don't see it, if that's what you're into. You know, if you want to stay material, if you want to keep it as totally material, because no, I said astral. Astral's still in the middle. Really, you want to get to the mental plane. So usually, the astral is supposed to be a perfect reflection of the mental plane, but the mental plane is more vast. So if you're just focused on the astral, you're still going to have a crash into your evolution, and that's what various systems are going into now. Part of that is because everyone knows Venus, just like everyone knows Mercury. But Mercury, Venus have higher octaves. Uranus, higher octave of Mercury. So what we're going to try to do is bring that back and understand why certain things are the way they are and why certain things didn't evolve the way it's supposed to have. Because sometimes at the end of the day, for some things to evolve, you need examples of what not to do. So no disrespect to Star Trek. Star Trek inspired many scientists. Even Stephen Hawking said he was inspired by Star Trek. This is not to put it down, but this is to show how sometimes Venus can leak into esoteric philosophy. And it's all right if you understand what Venus is, but when you don't understand what Venus is, delusions come in. So hope this helps. Until next time, peace.